can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Well, if we'd been recording this before we actually started recording, we would have not had to do any more, because we've had an extraordinary discussion. Now, Dickie, Richard Wollstonecroft, has arrived here with a man who's called Nicholas Robert Aitken. You probably know him more as Wilbur Wilde. I want to know why he's called Wilbur Wilde, and where did he get Wilde from? Was it Oscar? And where did Wilbur come from? But he is the great Wilbur Wilde, and thank you, Dickie, for bringing him in. I've known Wilbur for many years, mainly seen him on the golf course down at the National, but let's not ask you too many questions without getting any answers to them. Why are you called Wilbur Wilde, Wilbur?
Well, hello, Sam. Hello, Richard. What a lovely welcome. And you know all that stuff you were talking about we did before we started the microphone? I've got nothing.
No, you've got plenty.
That's it.
Yeah.
You tapped me out. No. Hey, Nicholas Robert Aitken was born on the 5th of the 10th, 1955, right? So I turned 70 very soon. And when I joined Old 55...
I was just going to say...
It really had nothing. The band was already called Old 55 by Glenn A. Baker, who named the band after a Tom Waits song, in fact, which the Eagles recorded. Yep. It's about a Chev, 1955 Chev. And so that was just coincidence. I joined Old 55 after going to Sydney in 1975 to study at the Conservatorium of Music doing the jazz course. So halfway through the year, I hear an ad on 2JJ, probably another legendary broadcaster, not unlike your good self, Sam Newman, Holger Brockman, or whom? Chris Winter, for those of our generation listening to 2JJ as it was. Back then, they would remember those names. I was driving around in a Holden Gemini belonging to the father of Eric McCusker. Now, Eric McCusker wrote Come Said the Boy, State of the Heart, Summer of 81, Chemistry for Mondo Rock. Right, in the 80s, as 6, 7 years later. Eric and I had met first day at school. So I go for an audition with Old 55 at the East Ryde RSL. I caught the bus out there and I saw for the first time the harmonies were good because they were sort of like a doo-wop sort of sha-na-na type. You know, at Woodstock, when sha-na-na came on, we all went, wow, they're great. I mean, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Hendrix, they were great too. But sha-na-na were this real fun, doo-wop, happy days type band. And then I saw Frankie J. Holden in a gold lame suit, and I thought, these guys look like fun. I joined that band, and the first gig I did with them was a live-to-air gig on 2JJ in the old Forbes Street studios. And when Frank introduced the band, he turned around and said, there's our drummer on Drain Pipe Plumber. Now, his name was Jeff Plummer, but they called him Drain Pipe. See what they did? Right, okay. Then our lead singer, Richard Jones, he was called Rock Pile Jones, right? He was so much not a rock pile, but anyway. And Frankie J. Holden, if he was sitting here now, you would be introducing him as Peter Bryan, but F.J. Holden was his name. Mm-hmm. When he turned to me, this is the first gig I've done with him, I did half an hour's rehearsal, that was enough, and he looked at me and instead of saying Nicky Aitken, I said, little Nicky, Phyllis's boy, I said Wilbur Wilde. Because I just thought, look, that'll do until I can think of something later on. So, and it just stuck.
You just had that in the back of your mind, Wilbur Wilde.
Why I did have that in the back of my mind is that the year before I'd spent on the Gold Coast and I'd toured with Roy Orbison, then I played in a nightclub, and then I joined a band called Ray Brown and the Whispers.
Yes.
So the drummer in that band, say 7, 8 months before, was a guy named Roger Felice. And he, when we were driving round to gigs or flying over to Mount Isa for, with that band, he'd tell me stories. Roger was fantastic. He's still alive, and we've squared up the Wilbur Wilde thing, as you'll understand. He used to tell us stories about his imaginary friends. Now, these were, Roger was together, but he had imaginary friends. Vivian Varvum, who was an internationally famous fashion model, and her millionaire Playboy consort was Wilbur Wilde. So I just thought I'd borrow it from Roger. It just stuck. And here we are.
And he's happy that you borrowed it?
Oh, he's cool. Yeah, we've sort of squared that up. Yeah. I think so. Anyway,
That's an amazing 10 minutes from a question I just asked you, and I got a feeling I could mention one more thing, and then I could sit back, and you'd fill in 3/4 of an hour doing this.
Well,
that's extraordinary.
Richard, when he invited me to do your podcast, said, what we need you to do, Willie, is come along, create an editing nightmare, and then piss off.
Yeah, well,
How am I going?
We edit nothing. So no, it is absolutely fantastic. So most people, not most people, but you would be the Hey at Saturday days.
Sure.
You went from 84 to 99.
We did.
And then I think you had 1 year when Darryl brought it back, did he not?
2010, we did 20 shows.
Yes. People ask me about the show I've been on for 25 years, but you were the precursor, the forerunner of something that we did called the Footy Show. How did you get onto that? And what was that? The main part of your vocation, or were you still just doing other things as well, mainly?
Look, live performance, the umbrella under which I have thrived, will do,
right.
For the last 50 years, included Hey at Saturday and gigs and everything. Okay, so playing with Old 55, for instance, our promotional outlets were, Countdown started in 1975. Yep. So we were on Countdown. We were on Donnie Sutherland's Sounds Unlimited.
Know them all.
Right, as we do, right. And Hey at Saturday was also a vehicle for Australian music, even though it was on in the mornings in those times. So you'd go on, you'd mime your single, or sometimes the lead vocalist would sing live and whatever. And so that's where the association with Hey began. I stayed for a couple of years with Old 55 and then came home to Melbourne, which, by the way, the reason I went to Sydney is they had a jazz course. I spent a couple of years up there, but I'm a Melbourne boy, right? Anyway, so I came home to Melbourne in mid-77 and joined up with Joe Camilleri in Joe Giuseppe and the Falcons. So once again, Hey at Saturday was a part of that, Countdown and the other aforementioned. But they'd come into the dressing room, we'd rock in from, you'd play the Tarmac Hotel at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, then you'd double into Bombay Rock.
Yeah.
Right, and after Bombay Rock, we might go around to Malcolm Williams' place. I can mention his name because he lives in Bali now, and he's offshore. And we'd rock straight into Makeup from... Marg Annesley would be in there, and I know you remember Marg very fondly. And she'd plaster us up, even though we were like 20 years old. We needed a bit of repair, and we'd go on Hey, but they'd ask for a volunteer, every now and then. Phil Lambert would come in and say, hey, we need somebody to sit on a panel, and I'd say, yep, I'll have a go at that.
Just as a matter of interest, why is Jojo Zepp, Joe Camilleri, called Jojo Zepp? What is that?
That band was named thusly before I joined. So Jojo Zepp and the Falcons started probably a year...
What's Zepp? Jojo is Joe, isn't it?
Yeah, Joe. Yeah, he's Joseph Vincent Stephen Camilleri.
Yeah.
And I think there's another few saints' names. That's what the Maltese do. Don't ask me. I don't know.
And Zepp.
And Zepp, I think that was just something that Joe would make up. You've got to remember Joe Camilleri, who's still a great mate, and I record with him and I play with the Sorrows every now and then. But he's got a way about him, like Harley and Rose. You know that tune, a very good hit for. Yep. Sorry, well, you'll ask Joe about something like that, and he say, "Oh yeah, I had two budgies." You go, no, and it's one of the classic love songs, and he says he writes it about budgerigars or something. Anyway, I didn't question Joe Giuseppe and the Falcons. I just thought it was a great name. More importantly, I thought it was a great band, so I joined up with them.
Just another great name.
Yeah, some decisions just make themselves. So that's where the association with Hey Hey began, and then Daryl had his Tonight Show during the early 80s, so we'd get in there and put together a super band for him. So it just was a sort of thing that when Hey Hey went nighttime, they called me, his former partner, Gavin Disney, who you'd remember, called me on a Monday morning. I was halfway out the door to a game of golf, and the phone rang. There was before mobiles, and I went, oh, will I go back inside and answer? Oh, right. So I go back, yes, hello, one of those ones. Yes, what do you want? And he says, Wilbur, it's Gavin Disney. Yes, Gavin. And it was early February. He said, Daryl and I would like a meeting. I said, and I'm thinking, okay, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, first tee, 11:30 or something. I go, how about 5 o'clock this afternoon? He said, how about now? I went, okay. And I went down.
Cancelled the golf?
Oh, well, I just said, right. I went down and had a meeting with Gavin and Daryl, and they said, we go to air in 10 days. We want you to be the band leader and get a band together.
This is for Hey Hey at Saturday.
Hey Hey at Saturday going night time for the first time in February. Probably Feb 12 springs to mind, or maybe that was the day my brother had his tonsils out. But anyway, that'll do. It's Fred Dagline. Daryl sat down and he said, well, I want a drummer, saxophone and a harpist.
Harpist?
Harpist, yeah. Well, because, it was the Hey Hey sort of zany, wacky thing. We ended up with...
what year?
1984. We went night time, 9:30 till midnight. And Gavin, who was a tough negotiator, told me years later that to get Kerry Packer to agree to put it on in the night time, because it had been successful in the mornings, right? And he had to go to Sydney to Kerry Packer's office. As I say, Gavin was a large man, a tough negotiator for whom we had a great respect / fear thereof. Gavin told me, he was actually a mate, and he told me the day that he went to Sydney to ask Kerry Packer kept him waiting in the outside office for about 2 hours. And then Gavin said, the receptionist said, oh, you can go in now, Mr. Disney. And Gavin walked in there. He was sweating. Kerry turned around to him and said, kept him for about 30 seconds and said, you've got 6 weeks. If it doesn't work, So 1984 through to 1999.
Fantastic.
It went okay, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it was marvellous. An institution.
So that's how it happened. And that was the first full-time secondment to the cast of Hey Hey at Saturday.
So when you were just about out the door to go and play golf, and it was Gavin Disney on the phone, and you said, well, can we have the meeting at 5? And he said, no, what about now? Surely you must have, just in order to cancel the golf, surely you must have asked what it was about, or did you say, why do you want to meet me?
No,
we have a proposition.
The way I actually tell the story is I kind of knew something good was going to happen, right? Well, I kind of knew that. How did you know that? I kind of knew that it was because...
Rumours?
No, just because
Chat
they were
the industry.
Bright. Okay, they were bright guys. Jackie McDonald, funny. John Blackman, funny. Phil Lambert, who by then was a senior cameraman, but there was a vibe about Hey Hey. I don't know whether I had any expectation. I can honestly say I probably didn't. Maybe I thought Gavin was going to say, hey, we'd like you to do a regular segment, whatever. You don't even think about that stuff. I must say that I didn't have to make too many phone calls to cancel the golf, but I threw my clubs down on the ground. I had a little bit of a tantrum that, no, I can't play golf anymore, I've got to go ahead and meet him. And then 17 years later, or was actually 16, I reflect on that occasionally to go, well, this is how life works out.
So obviously Blackman was a good friend of yours. They cobbled together John Blackman.
Yes.
And
Jackie was still there.
Yeah. How did John Blackman get the gig?
Well, Blackman was already with the show.
Was he?
In 1975,
75?
In fact, one of your opposite numbers, if I may call him that, Peter McKenna, co-hosted with Daryl Cartoon Corner.
He did too.
He did one episode. And right, because Peter McKenna in those days, he'd go out and kick 15 goals.
Yeah.
The day that he hosted Hey Hates that day in the morning, and he had, for all accounts, he was, or from all accounts, he's just fine and very personable chap, as you know, and I bump into him every now and then. But he went off to play footy, and he only kicked 8 that day, and they said, "No, don't bugger you. No, you're not doing TV again."
Yeah.
So I think Pete, I saw him recently at a woodsman's dinner, and he sort of came up and said, "Oh well, I said, "Oh, terrific, Pete," and he said, "Oh, I feel okay. I mean,
Yeah,
he said, "I got replaced by a stuffed ostrich, but that's all right."
Yeah, that's right.
That,
No, amazing
and so,
days.
Blackers was the show by then. Jackie, Red didn't join until 1986. Okay, I started in 84. We did, I think, 9:30 to midnight for most of the year, maybe 8:30, 10:30, a few more shows than that, and then 6:30 till 8:30 which became our traditional time slot, and that happened in 85. Red joined for their first show of 1986. Right, and by which time the show was bubbling along.
And why did Red join? Who decided that Red Simon should be on the show?
In the same way that my association had come about because of music and everything, so had Red's. Like he was involved in. Well, we were Red and I were mates by then.
Yep.
And he'd be on a panel or something, and became sort of part of the family. Also, I quit because they wanted me to they wanted me to take a pay cut. And at the end of 85, that was when Packer was getting the network. He did a big purge to sell the network to Alan Bond.
Yep.
So there were about, the numbers are close, but there were probably 600 people on staff, and Kerry got rid of like 350 of them, something like that. So it was a big thing. And
So did not Daryl own the show?
he did, but I think there was a thing where Kerry said, instead of giving you $37.90 a week, we're going to cut it back to $26.50. So that meant that I had to take a pay cut, which I thought was... Anyway, I quit and didn't do the first show of 1986. And I was lugging some black boxes into a jazz gig that night, thinking, I may not have made the right decision. I called Ernie Carroll on the Monday. I said, Ernie, he said, yes, Wilbur. I don't know whether I should have quit. He said, leave it with me. The next week, Gavin Disney called me on the Saturday morning, and he said, hello, Nicky. He used to call Gavin Disney used to call me Little Nicky, Phyllis's boy, because he was an Ivanhoe person, and Phyllis was our mum,
Yes,
of course,
Nicholas Robert Aitken.
Nicholas Robert Aitken. He called me Little Nicky, Phyllis's boy. I said, hello, Gavin. He said, what are you doing later on? I said, oh, nothing.
Going to play golf, but if there's a meeting on, I'm available.
He said, you want to come and do a TV show? I said, yeah, I'll see you about 6:30. So by which time, Red had been seconded. I know I've used that word already, but and I like the fact that it's a second because I was first. And then we stayed. And there was no issue about me returning and Red being kicked out. He was then by then a full-time cast member. And of course from 86 through till, we rated 45s on a Saturday night.
Yeah. Amazing.
And there's
was
250 logies or thereabouts. They're all kept at Daryl Summers' house for security reasons. But there it was.
So it would have been, I was just thinking what I would have done if I was on the footy show and someone said, oh, you're going to have to take a pay cut. I think I might have done. Mind you should never call someone's bluff unless you know what the answer is going to be, but I think I might have said I'm not copping a pay cut. That is unusual if you're contracted to do the show, and I don't know who owned it, whether Daryl or it was under the auspices of Kerry, but you wouldn't argue with Kerry, but it's quite a thing to do, to not sell your soul and do what you think you should do.
Well, the pay cut was like, I don't know, look, let's just say it was like 500 to 300 or something. And look, who knows? I mean, it's a long, long time ago,
Yeah.
and who knows what was going around in my head. But I suppose in principle, and sometimes that's okay. But
Good to be principled.
But it worked out.
Yeah.
Something happened where it worked out, and the show became. The thing about Hey Hey, and I mentioned that bit about Kerry Packer saying to Gavin, "You've got 6 weeks.
Yep.
If it doesn't bloody work." Really, what we had was a long time for Hey Hey to evolve a soul of its own, and it did so over many years.
Well, that is extraordinary, Wilbur, because that was exactly what was told to us when the footy show started. Ian Johnson called us in, and he probably got the marching orders from Kerry.
Yep.
He came in with Eddie and Trevor and me, and he said, "You got 6 weeks." We started.
That's right.
Yep,
Well,
6 weeks, and then we did pretty well the first 6 weeks, and then he said, "You got another 6 weeks," and after that, a bit like Hey Hey, it just started to go. So 6 weeks must have been the magical figure that the great Kerry Packer.
Kerry's default position. I don't know.
So you say Daryl's got all the. So there's a lot of you would have. There's a lot of chat about Daryl, and I don't know Daryl very well. He was the number one. Isn't his name? His name's Daryl Schwartz, isn't it?
Schultz. But he was number one supporter at Geelong.
He was
probably after your time, but
he was.
But of course, he goes back. Well, he came along and to see you play and crushed the beer cans under his feet so he could be a little bit taller to watch you.
That's right.
So, as a Geelong fan, he's been a great supporter of the club, hasn't he?
He has. So he ran Hey Hey at Saturday with a pretty iron fist, would you say that? Or
for lack of a better descriptor. He had...
control.
He did too, and it was a vision, I suppose.
Did we all get on with him?
Sure.
All of us got on with him well.
Look, it's family,
Yep.
It's family, and you make your way around it. Gavin, I mentioned Gavin, he left, he and Daryl parted company about, early 90, probably 1990.
Why?
They just had a disagreement.
Other interests and disagreement.
Yeah, Gavin went to pursue other interests, and Daryl and Ernie, of course. Yep. Now, see, it was a triumvirate.
Carroll, not Sigley.
Ernie Carroll, Gavin Disney, and Daryl Summers had Das Entertainment.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
When I joined, Ernie had, for those listeners who aren't aware of Ernie's history, Ernie Carroll, our Aussie ostrich, had written comedy for Graham Kennedy. Like, he had started when he'd come out of radio, and he'd started when television they were just making it up.
Yep.
Television started, 56 or whatever it was.
56 it was.
And Ernie and Johnny Ladd and all these names from the past.
I remember them all.
A guy named Gary Stewart was one of their producers. He was my agent for a while. And so they go into the studio, and Ernie said that Graham was... he was very fond of Graham and Bert and Phil Brady, who recently departed us.
He did.
He was involved back then too. So they were there for the formation. So Ernie was a great mentor for Daryl. And in fact, look, Ernie saw Daryl, I suppose, on New Faces or something, and saw a lot in Daryl, and said, "Hey, I like it," and took him under his wing. And that's how Cartoon Corner and the inception. It's a whole. There's a doco you could make about it. But Ernie, Daryl, and Gavin were the thing.
So we'll get on to other things.
Yeah, sure.
But
anyway, I hope that answers your question. There.
No, it does. But just on. So you had Aussie Ostrich, and you had Dickie Knee,
sure,
and. At what stage did the woke, it caught up with us, or caught up with me in the end, at what stage did the woke world, did it ever catch up with you? I know Kamal came out later and said that he'd painted his face, or they made fun of him and sent up his accent. And
well, that's, as you know, as I don't have to explain to you, nothing done by anyone 40 years ago holds up today.
No.
And whether it's Hogan, whether it's Ray Martin show.
Barry McKenzie, Barry Humphries.
Barry,
You have a look at his work.
Right.
It's
Nothing-
piss funny, but man, oh man.
Now, full frontal or fast forward, the same. Okay, name your program from 40 years ago. It's not going to stand up because it's a reflection of the culture of the time. Now, one very important quote from Daryl Summers. It's a thought and also a maxim. You can argue about, well, there's, misogyny and there's racism, there's sexism, everything like that. Now, there may well have been that. No, there was a great thing that happened on those aforementioned 2010 reunion shows where Harry Connick Jr. picked up on the Michael Jackson guys. Okay, just put a pin in what I was going to say, but Daryl and Harry Connick, that was a live show.
Yep.
Harry said, I can't come. We went to commercial break. Harry said, I can't come back on the show unless we address this. Daryl Summers, bless his cotton socks, was not the Minister for Foreign Affairs. He was a talented, comfortable adult to talk about anything on live TV. Daryl Summers. And he and Harry had a great, I was sitting 4 metres away from
On-air discussion.
live TV, national TV, and Harry Connick Jr. and Daryl Summers discussed between them a particularly complex issue, one taking an American liberal point of view, Daryl taking an Australian liberal point of view. And after all of that, it was sorted out. Right, and I knew, I sent an email later on that night to the principals because I knew that this was going to gather steam, and it did, around the world. Like it was even mentioned, it was on the Whoopi Goldberg show, it was mentioned on Jon Stewart.
So just before you go on, when you said Harry Connick had an American liberal point of view, that is a Democrat view.
No, I'm saying when I say
and
American,
the liberal here is considered a
right wing. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry. But the distinction I'd like to make is that Harry Connick Jr. grew up in New Orleans. The American experience is one of a history of racism and slavery. We don't have that. Well, actually, we do to some extent. But there were two grown men, grown adult men, on live television discussing a very complex issue, which was resolved on the night. And a very important thing about all that stuff that happened back then, this is that Daryl Summers thought and quote, okay, we had some laughs at stuff that these days you can't have laughs at, but on Hey Hey It's Saturday, there was never any malice intended. And when you look back at it, you realise that. So there was no malicious, racist agenda that we had.
No.
Right. You can't do it now. I understand that. Humanity, I believe, is improving. We've come a long way. Still got a way to go. But thanks for coming to my TED talk on racism 40 years ago in television.
Yeah. You say we've got a long way. What do you think it's... The wokeness is starting to dissipate a bit, or is it getting worse?
Wokeness is...
It is ridiculous what the vocal minority round you up for when, as you say, none of it is meant to be malicious. It's meant to be tongue-in-cheek. It's meant to be satire or parody. But
you, as much as anybody, are aware that at any given point in time, there is a component of society out there in constant search of something at which to be outraged.
and is very beautifully put.
Well, and of course, at the end of that sentence, you say, "No, you can stick it up their arse." And of course, we're going to get some phone calls. Great! We're not on. We haven't got a phone. I'll turn mine off.
You mentioned his name, and he's got nothing to do with this chat. But just in case, do you speak to Molly? Did you know Molly well?
Oh, very well.
And do you speak? How I used to speak to him quite a lot. He used to ring me. I've since tried to ring him, and
it's
not
difficult
heard
these
from
days.
him.
Well, you and I had a lovely photo taken together at Molly's 80th birthday, which of course is 2.5 years ago.
It is.
And that was a great night.
Yeah. Do you speak to him?
I haven't spoken. I've spoken with Big Al.
Yes.
Now, Big Al
Yep.
is sort of, he's one of his mates.
Yep.
Now, what I spoke with, or what I spoke with Al about, or about what I spoke with Al, was an issue that happened a few years ago now, and I don't want to dredge it up, where Molly was at a concert and he sort of did something, and then there was another concert where he did something, right? Now, my girlfriend is a palliative care nurse, and she has clients and she has women working for her.
This Sherry?
Cherry.
Yep.
Yeah, it's in the fruit. Right. So Cherry and I had a discussion about this, because if Molly had proper carers, like professional carers, and that's not to detract from his well-intentioned friends, and he's got plenty who try to look after him. That's a whole other issue. And of course, I spoke with Al, who's sort of like a man on the ground there, to say, hey, look, we can organise carers. And of course, Al said, Molly will not have a bar of it. Sorry, just on the Sam Newman. Molly will not have a bar of that, because he's Molly. And he'll, if you mention a professional carer, he'll chuck his remote at you. Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah.
So for somebody in his later life, coming up for 83 next year, he's making his own decisions.
It's extraordinary he's still with us.
Well,
isn't it? When he fell off the ladder all those Christmases ago.
And he was 2 years behind John Williamson at Quambatook Primary School.
Was he?
Yes, he was. There you go. Here's something for nothing. And Johnny Williamson is still... Well, John Williamson, what a hero.
Yep, absolutely.
Just fantastic. Very quiet, keeps to himself, lives up on the hinterland behind the Gold Coast there, and still makes some great Australian music. But just the fact that... two things. Molly and John Williamson, I love this stuff, right? There they are, sort of as kids. Now, who knew that was going to happen, right? Now, the love of music, Molly, that brought him to us through his, Go Set magazine, and they loved the Beatles and Rolling Stones, and we end up with one of the shapers of Australian culture, right? And then John Williamson. It's just down the road. Oh, the Williamson boy, yeah, he's nice. He's a couple of years older than you, love. But he goes up and shapes the culture. And the other thing I wanted to mention is a couple of years ago, on May 21st, just past, Joe Camilleri turned 75 years old. Yep. He's 77 this year, but 75 birthday we had at the Palais, right? Now, Joe was born on the island of Gozo in Malta. The Palais, we had a couple of thousand people in there. It was a Sunday night, and the other guy on stage with Joe, with his band, was Leo Sayer.
Really?
Leo Sayer and Joe Camilleri, born on the same day in the same year. Joe on Gozo and Leo in Ealing, I don't know where Leo is born, but in England. And there, 75 years later, converging... I played with Camilleri that night, and Leo. I mean, know Leo very well over the years.
He's an Australian resident.
That's
now.
right. Lives up in Sydney.
Immigrated.
But don't you think that's a fantastic thing? It's
extraordinary.
75 years down the track, and they're good mates.
Yep.
And they filled the Palais up, and the people loved their music. And same day, same year, and Leo, when he, because I remember when most of my known children, I was there for their birth or close. I was at Thredbo for the twins. That's not close, is it? Anyway, sorry.
It's a great song. You make me feel like dancing, Leo Sayer. He's still doing it, isn't he?
Leo's still singing better than ever.
Is he?
Yeah, and when you see somebody like that, and I learnt this from Matt Taylor. Remember Chain?
Yep.
Matt Taylor.
Yes.
I did quite a few gigs with Matt, and at the end of one of them, it's about 15 years ago, this chick came up and said, "Oh, Matt, you're singing just as good as you did back in the 60s. And Matt Taylor's gone, "Oh, I'm singing a lot bloody better than that, love, 50 years down the track." So, never say singing better than ever.
Yeah, dear me. Now, I've got written down here.
What do you got?
Just movies, ads. You're a celebrant. You've done radio.
Yep.
Hang on, radio.
You've got
Willie and the Troublemakers, your golf, your betrothed. I don't know if you're betrothed to Cherry. But you've got 3 children to her.
No kids
You've
to
got
Cherry.
none to Cherry.
No children to Cherry.
Where have all your 5 kids come from?
The first one
You
came
might be like
from,
the duck. He's got 3 different mothers that he brings in.
I've got 5 from 3.
Have you?
I've got 5 from 3.
Well
2
done.
of whom I chose wisely not to marry.
Yes.
Right. Ryan, my eldest,
Yep.
his mum and I met at the Shadow Commodore Hotel in King's Cross in 1979 after the concert of the decade on the steps of the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah.
And that was the concert where Stevie Wright, for the first time,
Yeah.
performed Evie Parts 1, 2 and 3.
Stevie Wright from
Easy Beats.
Fantastic.
Came on and did, and he was fit and well, and he came on and did, it's on YouTube, and it's just this legendary, iconic performance. He's in his white sort of, I think there were acres of cheesecloth involved because he'd been doing martial arts and everything, and he came on, and we were there that day. The Falcons played, and I played with Frankie Joe Holden, and there were about 300,000 people, and
the Easy Beats.
if you look really carefully, and I do because it's like a vanity search, right? You can see me up the back playing the saxophone with the Masters Apprentices on Turn Up Your Radio.
The Masters Apprentices,
Yeah,
the
Jimmy
Easy
Keats.
Beats.
Yeah, it was a fantastic day. So anyway, Scarlett, Ryan's mum, and I met in the bar, which is rooftop bar on the Shadow Commodore. I was having a little après performance, refreshing beverage with Stewie Spears and Max Merritt that night. And she walked down, I can tell you, she walked down the stairs to the rooftop garden. It was a lovely, temperate Sydney night. And, we were celebrating. We'd had a big day and wonderful sort of thing. And she walked down the stairs and I turned to Max. I said, that reminds me of Scarlett O'Hara descending the stairs of Tara in the...
in the Gone,
it was
Gone
just
with the Wind.
Yeah. Right, we've got a filmmaker here who knows what we're talking about. And Max said, go and bring her over for a drink. So I did. I went, hello, my name's Wilbur. Hi, Scarlett. Come over. And she said, that's not my name. I said, yes, it is. And come over and meet Max. And that's where the trouble started. We have a 44-year-old son who's a great mate. He's served in Timor. He served a couple of tours in the Solomons. Yep. He's got 2 lovely little daughters, McKenna and Paige. Yep. And he married one of the women from the army. And my son's only ever been a corporal, but he married a captain. He got to marry the commanding officer. So
is there any point going through who Elliot, Howard, Toby and Zibby are?
Zibby's mum and I, she's an artist and we're still good mates. By the way, I'm friends with Scarlett too. We don't see each other a lot. But Velda, Zibby's mum, is she's been a muse and,
A muse?
over the years.
That.
She's sort of hipped me to some quite incredible music and, chuck some stuff. She's an art person, an art teacher and art historian.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Velda and I, and she's got a great husband. He's fantastic, and she's been a great mum to Zibby, and a good friend to me. Right. I go to New York 15 years ago. I went over there to have a look. I did some study or something like that at University of Kentucky, just a summer jazz course. And so I end up in New York, and I go to the Metropolitan Museum. Now, in the Metropolitan Museum, it's mind blowing, the whole thing. But I found a Frank Lloyd Wright room, right, the architect, right? Yep. So, and it's all Frank Lloyd Wright. The design, the furniture, it's absolutely just iconic Frank Lloyd Wright stuff. The table, the furniture, the beautiful eaves that he did, right? And so I take a photo of the Frank Lloyd Wright room, just the room itself, right? And it's good, and a fireplace and everything like that. Unmistakably Frank Lloyd Wright. And I send it to Velda, right? I say, I'm in New York, this is my Airbnb, $120 a night. Of course, within about 4 seconds, bullshit. So anyway, that's the sort of funny things we do. Because she's a hip chick and knows stuff, and I have been very fortunate to have surrounded myself, or found myself surrounded, I shouldn't be pass ag about it, I have found myself in life surrounded by some bright and funny people, Sandy Newman, and I consider that
important in life. Are you a practiced saxophonist, or are
practice every
you?
day.
When I meant practiced, are you absolutely studied it, or is it just a hobby?
No, I had a formal education for music, and I like in year 12, I studied classical saxophone and stuff, and then I was going to go to the conservatorium, but they didn't take saxophone as a first instrument, so I went to the Gold Coast and toured with Roy Orbison, and I went to Monash for 6 months, and then dropped out because I started getting some gigs, and then ended up on the Gold Coast working in a nightclub, and then went to Sydney to do the jazz course, so I re-enrolled in a sort of formal thing. And then it lasted about 6 or 7 months there before I joined Old 55. And the rest is, there's no practice like out in the centre.
No, and there's a lot of songs that feature saxophone these days, or in days gone by, that always have a spot in the middle of a song. You'd be amazed. Well, you wouldn't be amazed, but who was Dave Brubeck? Dave Brubeck. Who was his saxophonist?
Paul Desmond.
It was too, Paul Desmond. I knew it was Paul Desmond. Joe Morello was on drums.
That's right.
But Paul Desmond, that's the first saxophonist I ever knew of.
Well, they had a big hit, a tune written by Paul Desmond called Take 5.
Yeah.
Now, it's here, I think it's apropos for me to introduce a little detail about you. Now, on Sundays, years ago, mid-2000s, I had a trio down at the waterfront, down at Station Pier, in that restaurant, and you often, after whatever activities, you might have lunched with friends, you whatever your day held, you might have pulled up in that tinny you had there for a while, I don't know whether you still got it, and you would come in and sit there and listen to us, sometimes accompanied, sometimes not. And you would listen to
live music. Used to love it.
Michael Cristiano guitar, Lizette Payette piano, and there you go. You've just said it. Live music.
Used to love it.
And I was so chuffed when you would come in there, and you'd always come up and say, "Oh, I love that tune you played on saxophone. I really like that." And "Oh, Michael, what a good guitar."
No, I do that.
You were, just a person who had respect for the, anyway.
For the art.
I know I thanked you then,
music.
but I wanted to mention it that will be with me forever.
Very, very. Great admiration for people who can play a musical instrument and do it well.
You were attuned to the vibe, man, and it's about the vibe.
It is. Speaking of the vibe, so the people you said did the 10th anniversary on the Opera House. What was that?
The concert of the decade.
Yeah, concert of the decade.
Oh, look, that was a huge thing.
So was Billy Thorpe was he around then? Was Skyhooks around then?
Skyhooks didn't play, Sherbet did. Skyhooks couldn't get back to this. In 1979. So Skyhooks, I think, I'm just wondering whether the Hooks were there. I think there was a version of Split Ends. It was a big mushroom thing as well. Oh, you know who it was? It was like, who was the rock station? It was like...
3AK, where Wrinklies fly.
No, 3XY by then was our rock and roll station.
Right.
But in Sydney,
York.
it was like 2SM. There you go.
Yes. Yep.
2SM with a big... And it was AM radio.
Yep.
FM had sort of when did FM start? When did Triple M start? Maybe 1980 or something.
Yep.
Because, in fact, in Melbourne, Jojo Zepp and the Falcons recorded the theme tune for what was then Eon FM.
Yep.
92.3
That's right.
will achieve. Eon will achieve. And we ripped it off bloody Third World. They were a reggae band. Camilleri knows that now, so we're... Anyway.
So you do, do you still do radio, cafe... classic cafe?
No, look, I haven't done full-time radio for quite some time. I love it. I'll go and smash out an hour with Darren James on AW, which I love, and we don't do any preparation, which is terrific.
I've got a feeling you wouldn't need to,
we just rock in
by
there.
what's been going on here in the last 45 minutes. Yeah, that's been brilliant.
But Darren will have guests there. The last time? It was only a couple of weeks ago, and we had, his first guest was... Brian Canham from Pseudo Echo,
Yeah.
right? And Brian and Raquel, his wife,
Yep.
had ridden in. They live out near
We've
Healesville.
had them in here, Dickie,
Have you?
haven't we?
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Now they came in from Healesville that morning. What time we go on here? 10:30 on a Saturday.
Yep.
They'd ridden the Black Indian in because Darren said, "What do you know?" Because they've arrived in black leathers.
Yep.
Right, obviously, motorcycle born. And Darren says, we have to describe this for the listeners. Both wearing, black leathers, Brian and Raquel. And what did you ride in on? Because Darren rides a bike. He's a sort of bikey guy. And Brian said, an Indian.
Yeah,
and Darren said, what colour? He said, black. And he said, Wilbur, Brian. I said, I thought it was Marlon Brando, but yes, So off, and you're off and running because you've got stuff that is part of our lives and part of everybody,
Fastest Indian in the world.
I've not seen Anthony Hopkins in that, but I must have a look at it, yes?
I've watched that, I reckon, 8 times.
Great,
It keeps coming
there
on.
you go. That's an imprimatur.
It would have taken 2 bob to make it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, great.
Because it's true.
Yeah, well, I've seen little shorts of it, and I go, I must watch it. Yeah, yeah.
It's good because it's true. Yeah. That man went and got a 50cc motorbike to do 200 miles. It was some extraordinary thing. It was amazing. And Sir, what's his name?
Anthony Hopkins.
He was fantastic. Now, Wilbur. So just
we're up to 1973, by the way.
Just on. So you are Willie and the Troublemakers.
Wilbur Wilde and the Troublemakers. Yeah.
Wilbur Wilde and the
Wilbur
Troublemakers.
Wilde and the Troublemakers.
Not Willie and the Troublemakers.
Well, Wilbur Wilde and the Troublemakers. That's fine.
Yes.
But that's
they
banned
are for. People can ask you to come to functions and play. What is that?
Well, on wilburwilde.com, that's WILBURWILDE.com, you can book the Troublemakers, and we play music from the
Functions.
Countdown. Yeah, anything, Countdown era.
But for private functions.
Oh, yeah, the next gig we've got with the Troublemakers is on June the 8th. We're playing in Mornington. There's a music festival on, so the Troublemakers will be there.
I see.
And it's a real hustle out there, so it's always been a hustle, but it's really tough these days. So I appreciate the plug. We're playing at a friend's winery down in Curlewis, One Day Estate. That's on July 5th. I'm currently on the road with Scott Kahn, Brian Mannix, Ali Fowler, Bob Starkey from the Skyhooks.
Fantastic.
And we're doing the Stars of Countdown show. So once again, I still continue to thrive on live performance, Sam.
Yep.
And I get out there. Sometimes I'm a rock star. Other times I'm just a radio sort of cat. And you mentioned I've done a couple of funerals as a celebrant. I can't do weddings because I'm not, you've got to have all the qualifications.
I see.
But, anyone can do funerals.
Can you?
Yeah, and I've done 3 so far. And funnily enough, I really enjoyed it. They were all different.
Yeah.
John Blackman's was different from the other 2.
Yes.
And it was a lovely occasion. It was a lovely feeling I had to be able to send my old mate off.
Yes.
And when I say that, all I did was direct traffic. Bobby Talbot, great friend of the Blackman family, spoke.
Yep.
Tiffany, John and Cecile's daughter, spoke.
Yep.
And Daryl Summers spoke beautifully from the heart as well.
Good.
So, and you're involved in a very important procedure of closure. And anyway, so I take that seriously, but yeah.
I asked John to come, could he come and be interviewed? And he said, I can't speak very well. I said, mate, you can speak. That's why we'd like to...
He still sounded like John Blackman,
so
didn't
he came in here and he can't remember, were we filming it then? We weren't filming it then. No. He said, I'm a bit embarrassed if you go. I had a photo taken up in the front. He said, I said, mate, you look fine. And it doesn't matter if you don't look fine. That's what happened. You've survived, and you've survived. And he was fantastic. I had a good chat to him about everything.
About 4 days after he got out of rehab, and the ordeal through which he went.
Yep. The
ordeal he endured. I don't need to go into details. I know them all because I stood beside Blackers during that.
Yep.
I'd organised for him. He'd been home for about a few days, and I'd organised for a visit to Ernie Carroll and his life partner Miffy Marsh. They had a lovely place at Mount Eliza, and they loved John, and he loved them. And I said, I've had a chat with Miffy. She's going to make us a cup of tea on Tuesday morning at about 11:30. He said, oh, great. So I said, right, I'll pick you up at 10. He said, I don't look real flash, mate. I said, yeah, sure. He's come out of the house, right, and his jaw had been removed and there was plastic surgery, and obviously you could tell that he'd undergone a significant procedure. And I looked at him and I just started going, like this. He's covered up his chin and gone, yeah, it doesn't look real flash, does it? And I said, the face is fine. You're just wearing a purple shirt with black pants.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll say bastard here, but it was another word. And then he said, oh, I love you. Oh, I love you too. And we had a big hug and we went off and had a lovely visit with Ernie and Miff. And Blackers, that was, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And
I gave him one of my You Cannot Be Serious hats. He would not be interviewed. He said, I'm going to put that on. He wouldn't be interviewed without a hat on.
He's baseball, that's right.
He was very self-conscious about,
he was a proud person.
Mate,
here's the thing, that procedure deprived him. Okay, he's the man of 1,000 voices, right?
Yep.
John Blackman, Dickie Neame, Mrs. Mac, you name him, the Angel, all these fantastic integral characters of Hey Hey It's Saturday, and the insidious, cruel nature of that disease took his voices away from him.
Yep.
To the extent where, in the olden days, if we were travelling somewhere, Red would, purposely annoy him, just for fun, right? And, we'd be boarding a plane somewhere and Red would, intentionally go and sit in John's, window seat or something, right? And Blackers would get in there and he'd say, Red, and Red, it was just like, it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious. Some people would just call it petty and childish. I think it's hilarious, right? And he'd say, Red, he'd say, yes, John. And he'd go, would you mind? And Red would say, what's that, John? And Blackers, standing up the front of the plane, he'd go, don't make me use my theatre voice, Red. Actually, he said radio voice, but, and it was just a booming sort of thing, right? That's of what John Blackman was deprived.
Yep.
He still sounded like Blackers on the phone, but when it came to projecting that wonderful, he couldn't do commercials anymore. I mean, thousands of commercials that he did, and he could modulate, and he could do, he kept down. I wouldn't even attempt to imitate the range and the talent, the voice talent that he had.
So, do you have a retreat up in Dalesford, or do you have?
Cherry's got a dump up in Dalesford. Yeah.
Is that a wellness? Or is it just a residence?
It was the country house is like a little 3-bedroom thing, but she actually rents that out now because Airbnb, it's getting too hard. But she kept a little sort of tiny house, so if we want to get away, we can do that. But you know what? My retreat, and we sort of brushed on this a little bit, right? My retreat, my personal retreat, is in my apartment block. I have, there's 2 levels of underground car park, right? Now, I love practising the saxophone.
Yep.
Like during COVID, when it first hit, we're going, what's going on? And with no gigs, and, it was a traumatic thing, right? We all went through it. And then after about a week or so, I said, shit, I haven't played the horn for a while. And I started practising. I'd go down to the car park, a little bit illegally because you weren't supposed to leave your,
But you didn't want to annoy people with the noise.
The apartment. I mean, I could, look, truth be known, it's a good build. I could probably practice in the apartment. But what I do, I've got a collapsible chair over in the far corner. I'm out of everyone's way. I don't bug anyone. And the acoustics are good. And I just go down there and I play the saxophone, and that's my spiritual retreat. It's my solace and there's a musician saying, when you're not feeling so good, that's a great time to go and play the blues. But when you're feeling good, that's also a good time to go and play the blues. It is
indeed. So you'll notice that this is a question from a person who's not a musician. Is it possible to put a mute in a saxophone so that No, oh, it's not the same.
Well, you can get friends of mine have got
Stick a thing in it like they do the
You
trumpet.
can get like a phone booth thing, like a soundproof phone booth,
I
if
see.
you want to go nuts and put it in your study, and you can sound. In fact, look, I did experiment with a bit of soundproofing for my early days of. Like when I was trying to set up Zoom conferences and things like that, I thought, now hang on, do I line a box with bits of rubber and then put my head in there to, But of course you realise that it's just easy to go down to the bloody car park.
Now, Wilbur,
Sam?
what does the experience of playing golf teach you about yourself?
I think golf is a life allegory, Sam. No better life allegory than the game of golf.
For why?
Well,
What's it teach you about yourself? I know what it teaches me about myself, but...
Sure, I don't want to hedge any of that, but I think you and I would have common ground in that the only person you have to blame for anything is yourself. And most of the time...
That's a luxury in life.
Most of the time, the only thing over which we can have any control is our attitude.
Spot on, and mine has left a lot to be desired over the years. I've matured a lot, but that is exactly right.
I hope you haven't matured too much, by the way.
No, I'm resigned to the fact that I'll never be as good as I was, and I'm resigned to that fact. I now go for the camaraderie more than I do go for the competitiveness of it.
Sure,
but it's...
well, you were a professional athlete, and the competition is never ever going to leave your system, because that's been. I had the privilege of playing cricket alongside Michael McCarthy, amongst others.
Yep.
Now, Michael McCarthy was state cricketer, opened for the Ones at Melbourne, and of course was a Hawthorn AFL grand final player. And I was standing out there with him one day. He'd bowled 6 overs for not many and hadn't taken any wickets, but I shone the ball for him and threw it back, and I said, Flash, I tell you, I'd give my time over again to get the ball to soar through to the keeper like that. And he looked at me and said, it's all right for you, Will. You can come out here and have a good time. I have to win. Right?
Yeah, no, that's...
And I understood that.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, he's lightened up a lot.
Yeah.
Old Gilligan, that's his other nickname.
Yeah.
I see him at Southern. He's playing at he plays at Southern on a Monday.
No, I don't.
Oh, he's a good golfer, as he would be.
The great thing about golf, you'll probably agree with this, is that it is so easy to cheat in golf. It is so easy to dud the people you're playing with, dud yourself moreover.
Yep.
And if winning means everything and you play for a little cash and that, and if it is a great contradiction in terms. I want to move, I want to do something because I don't think I can do that. And if you do that, something says you'll never be the same again. You'll never look at the people you play with or against. Because I know it's not many ethics and morals do I have in life, but golf is one of them, because it makes you stop, because it's so easy to do the wrong thing. You tend to it's reverse psychology. You tend not to.
Well, look, as far as your ethics and morality go, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole just yet, but I would disagree with what you just said. But apropos of the golf, I'll lasso a John Blackman comment from 35 years ago when he first joined the Fairway Club. Blackers and I were doing brekkie at UZ, and he only used to play once a year at Jack Newton's tournament, right? He'd go up there and we'd just come back from the tournament. He said, I played like a bloody dickhead. I said, well, he said, I only play once a year. And I said, well, how would you like to play more than once a year? I play with the Fairway Club on Mondays. And he said, you don't want me to come along to that. And I said, come along. And, of course, we get him along, and he just became a stalwart member, wouldn't miss it, everything like that. And, half a dozen years down the track, he said to me, and something happened, as it does at golf clubs, and from time to time, and somebody had been caught with, they'd use the shoe iron out of the bushes or whatever. And John observed, he said, you know what? I would rather have a rabid Doberman perform oral sex on me than be caught cheating at golf.
Yeah, that's right.
John Blackman. John Blackman. There you go.
To cheat at golf's one thing. To be caught cheating is that's just like being a accused of murder or being a tax cheat.
Well, it's an interesting ethical thing, isn't it? I mean, if you can, and this is what I mean by it being a life allegory too. If you are going to cheat at golf, you touched on it before, you're not going to be the same person.
No, you're not.
You
no matter how hard you try to be.
You can't go back from that, you know. Well, I suppose you can, but, well, I mean, I cheated.
I know this sounds like degrees of being pregnant. There's degrees of cheating. If you walk into the undergrowth and your ball is 8 feet away and you step on a branch here that actually moves your ball that you could never play in the first place, and you try and hit it out onto the fairway, you say to someone, look, my ball's moved, you think, shit, I'll just walk in and play it out. That is actually cheating.
And the rules of golf, with which we are both fairly familiar, they're not but they really boil down to common sense, which is once again, and common sense being,
is it? Yep.
I know,
not common.
Not a lot common about common sense, but they're the decisions that we have to make in life, aren't they?
Well, I'm making a decision, Wilbur, now to wind this up because I don't want to. I could, as I say, ask you about 2 or 3 things and just sit back. You've been an extraordinary raconteur. You're an extraordinary talent.
Likewise.
And you're an extraordinary man. And it has been an absolute delight. You've mentioned every person you've mentioned I've grown up knowing and been with theoretically through the journey. I know them all.
Well, and they know you, and you're part of this too, Sam.
No, none of the people that you've mentioned would know me, but I've known all the groups and people and managers and film producers and all that. So, Dickie, thank you for arranging Wilbur to come in. And thank you so much for being on You Cannot Be Serious, my friend.
Good on you, Sam. Let's shake hands. There we go. That's on microphone. Thanks. It's been my pleasure. And wilburwilde.com.